Welcome to Inspired Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Welcome back, everybody. This is another podcast called Inspired Change. I'm really excited to be here with two very learned and experienced gentlemen, Mr. Mark Hodgson and Mr. Mark Williams. And the reason why I'm really excited is because this is one of the installments in our series of podcasts that's going to be about having a meaningful conversation within the thought leader space, and in particular about men, psychology, change, and also the whole idea about what might be some of the thoughts and feelings that we have about what's going on in current affairs and so on. So this is not going to be a one-off. This is, in fact, the first of a series that I'd like to work with. So let me introduce, first of all, Mark Hodgson. Mark and I have known each other for quite a few years, and he's been working very diligently with me to keep me on the straight and narrow in terms of developing my thought leadership field, especially with regard to my project on making good men great. I have a tendency to get somewhat lofty and verbose. He keeps me in line. Now, Mark has spent 25 years as a corporate leader himself, initially in media sales, but then he became interested in the broader base of leadership and change, and he's got experience working in the UK, Central Europe, Russia, and finally he's hit the shores down under.
Yay.
And he's so committed to being down here that he's taken up an absolutely insane sport called surfboat rowing. Those of you who aren't familiar with that sport, please go to YouTube, and there are several videos that show the insanity of that sport. I did it for one season, broke my larynx, and decided to give it a miss and just stick to surfing. So, like all of us, Mark's got a story about change, and I'm going to let him speak to that a little bit more himself. But as I said, he's a fantastic person for me to work with because he's very real, very authentic, and very knowledgeable in that whole space of change. So that's Mr. Mark Hodgson. Mr. Mark, in fact, I should correct that, it's actually Dr. Mark Williams. He's sitting next to me, and he is, in fact, a professor of cognitive neuroscience at Macquarie University, which is my old alma mater.
Oh, it's a nice place.
Yeah, it is. Well, it was. There's certain challenges these days, like in all organisations, with, things like politics and managing change and so on. But the last time I was up at Macquarie, which was a couple of months ago, I was absolutely stunned by the development of the infrastructure in buildings and so on. And I still haven't set foot into the new library. One of the things that Mark is particularly interested in is the effects of overuse of technology on human interactions. And he's passionate about helping people to reconnect with what matters in the real world, which resonates for me really strongly when I talk about making good men great, because one of the challenges I think for us as men in the big space is that a lot of times we arrive into our later age feeling isolated and alienated. And technology, in my view, could bridge that, but unfortunately what I'm seeing is the opposite. Now, like Mark Hodgson, Mark Williams has obviously some experiences around change that I'd really like him to share himself, and especially in terms of what led to the change, but also the consequences of change. So let me start with Mr. Hodgson.
Hello, Gunter.
G'day, Mark. So nice to see you
It's
again.
great to be here. We've been talking about this for a long time. Really looking forward to the three of us getting together and riffing.
Absolutely. And my suggestion is let's keep this as casual as we can. this is not to blow anybody away with our brilliance, but rather with our thoughtfulness and our capacity to have a meaningful conversation about some pretty, challenging topics. So tell me, Mark, in your experience, what were some of the sort of change points for you in your life?
So I think, geographical. I was, as you can probably hear, I'm originally English, so I lived in the UK until I was about 29, and I got to a point where it seems ironic now. I was kind of a bit bored with London. And they say if you're tired of London, you're tired of life. But that's 29. I wanted to go and see the world, and then that led me to follow my then girlfriend, now wife, and we lived in Central Europe. Lived in Budapest in Hungary for 5 years, in an early career stage, and then we travelled to Australia at some point in that, and sort of fell in love with Australia and changed again. So I guess through sort of a wanderlust and brave in pursuit of love and career, there some physical changes of geography, literally all the way across the world. And then, but I think as my own career developed, I got to the point where I sort of started out as a subject matter expert, if you like, in media sales and advertising and marketing, but became more and more interested in the, the human side of change and leadership. And I suppose also at the same time becoming a little bit more disenfranchised with the, certainly marketing and advertising, which was very much a slippery, a greasy pole where the people who rose to the top, weren't probably the nicest people in the world. And I kind of became disenchanted with that, and sort of had questioned my own sort of desire to kind of win in that race, as it were. Because as I grew, as my career, progressed, I became more interested in leadership, more interested in change, did a degree in change management, which I now sort of throw a rock at, because I don't think you manage change, you lead it. I think it's really important you lead change. But really sort of, moved more in towards expressing myself, going away from the corporate career path of my own, even though I'd love to have been a CEO. I kind of diverted from that for a whole range of reasons. For the last 10 years, I left corporate. In fact, having led a successful business transformation, very successful business transformation, I was fired, and so was my whole team. So I thought, well, bugger that for a game of sold. So I'm going to set up my own consultancy, which I now do. So I think there's multiple phases, and I guess I'm at the stage now, having set up my own consultancy, which sounds wonderful, is really, really hard. And that's been a 10-year journey of growth and learning for me. We talk about change, and I think I'm now, having done a lot of work, a lot of self-work, which I'm sure we'll talk about, got to the point now I've kind of designed the life I want, which sounds very glamorous. It's not glamorous. As I know both of you guys know, that's based on a shit ton of hard work. In terms of looking inside yourself for what it is you want, taking risks, making sacrifices, and I thank my family for going and always being very supportive of my sort of ambition or supportive of the journey I've gone on. And now we find ourselves really, I think it's fascinating, on the other side of the coronavirus piece, where it's a terrible thing, but also fascinating from a change perspective. And I actually and I look at you two guys, and I think of the people I know who are actually doing well through this, or at this stage, and I think are well placed to change again going forwards. And they are the people who've invested in that self-work and gone on their own journey, as opposed to stayed in safe places. So I guess to listeners, I would encourage you to be brave, but also to understand, it ain't overnight success. Success is multifaceted, and it's a hard journey. But I think I'd encourage anyone to take it.
Thanks for that, Mark. Dr. Williams. I've got to get that right. God, Dr. Williams. Now, when I met Mark, Google is a fascinating place, because you usually orientate yourself through Google about who you're about to meet. At least that's what I do. And I know most of my clients do. So they know a little bit about me. And so I got this picture when I saw Mark's website, where I went, okay, not the usual academic. and that's my own bias, I admit that. Mark Hodgson gave me a heads up, said he doesn't look like that. Now, you've got a really interesting story, I think, in yourself. You certainly allude to that in your sort of short bio on your webpage.
Yes, thanks, Gunter. So I grew up in country Victoria around a time when it was very high unemployment down in those areas. And I was a truant. I hated school. I didn't think of myself as being bright. There was family issues, which meant that I wasn't happy in who I was. I mean, there was to a point where in year 9 or Form 3, my principal told my parents, got them into an interview and told them I'd either be in prison or dead by the time I was 25. So I should get an apprenticeship at the local abattoir, which is what most people in that area did. It was one of the very few big industries in the area. So it was either you became an apprentice at the abattoir, in which case you lost a finger, or you went into the forestry industry, in which case you usually lost a hand or a foot. So I left Colac as soon as I could, went to Melbourne, got odd jobs. I worked night shift in service stations because it was good money, and a great life experience because there's some really odd things that happen on 11 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday evening. Really interesting process. And I also worked in car attendant. I did what I needed to do so I could get money together, and then I travelled through Southeast Asia a lot. It wasn't until I was 25 I had 2 good friends both have drug overdoses, which made me rethink where I was and what I was doing at that stage, realised that I wanted to make a change. I didn't know what that change was, but I went back and did my year 12 at TAFE.
Did you do the 2 years in 1 year? Or?
Yeah. So I did 2 years in 1 year. Because I just wanted to get it done as quickly as I could. And I had both a physics teacher and a maths teacher that saw something in me that I'd never seen before. And they really inspired me to actually then go to university and actually keep going. So I got into science, went to Monash, loved science at Monash. In the third year, I also volunteered in a hospice. So it was end stage hospice. It was the last 2 years of life, 2 weeks of life, and I volunteered there, and that was a great opportunity to actually see what happens in families when they're actually changing, but also see the whole process that people go through. Well, I mean, the thing that amazed me that still resonates with me is that even when people are dying, if they're arseholes during life, they're usually still arseholes when they're dying. If they're nice people during life, they're still nice people when they're dying. This whole thing of, all of a sudden we go, lights on, lights on, all the rest of it when you're dying. It doesn't really happen, or it rarely happens. And so it made me realise I had to make a change then. And become a better person than I'd been. There's a lot of violence in my life. There's a lot of drugs and alcohol in my life. I have a lot more tattoos than most professors do. But I went from there. I went on, got a CJ Martin fellowship, and went to MIT in the US, which is a great opportunity. It's a fantastic place to work. Top 4 universities in the world. But it was really interesting because when I was there is when both Mark Zuckerberg was at Harvard. So Facebook was released, and Facebook was only released to MIT and to Harvard students because it was just a dating site back then. So it was interesting for me because I saw it as a dating site and still see it very much as a dating site for Mark Zuckerberg and his mates to get laid. And, now it's sort of they're taking over the world. But at the same time, also the first iPhone was released. So I saw that also evolve and saw the changes. But I saw it from the point of view of MIT, where you've got vast majority of startups in technology come from MIT. I was over the road from the Computer Science and Information Technology Lab, which has had more startups than any other lab in the world that have earned more than $1 billion. It's an amazing place. But, I mean, those people don't spend all their time on technology, and that's the thing that really worries me, is that there's all these people that think if I learn how to use an iPad really well, I can become the next tech guru. And it's actually not true. You need to actually be inspired to come up with the next big thing, but you're not going to do that by being good at an iPad. So I came back to Australia, worked in Australia for a number of years, loved teaching, loved inspiring the next generation, and then had kids. And that's when things also sort of changed for me, because I had the principal at my kids' school start talking to me about technology and start talking to me about better ways of teaching and better ways of inspiring kids. And so that also caused a shift. I was then unfortunate enough to meet Mark who convinced me that I should actually do a bit of a switch and start working with schools and working with companies on better ways of managing technology and looking at the neuroscience of learning. Unfortunately, a lot of the basic research that comes out, it doesn't actually hit the education sector or the corporate sector until 15, 20, 30 years after we've actually discovered it. And so bringing that to light earlier, I think is really important. And so, yeah, I'm working a lot on that, actually bringing what we now know about the brain and what we now know about how we learn and think and do those things out there into the real world and working with schools on getting teachers up to speed on better ways of teaching, which is great.
Well, it's interesting that you should bring that up because I tend to see a similar problem in counselling and psychotherapy psychology, where a lot of the stuff that's being hailed as, cutting edge sort of intellectual material is actually not quite up to speed with the neuroscience. And that to me is a real concern. We're trained as, scientists, practitioners, but there seems to be this disconnect. And one of the things, I've been doing this long enough to sort of see trends. And, one of the first trends that I saw was that when I came into the field, I was a counsellor in the addictions, and suddenly the treatment option for heroin addiction was methadone. Now, some of the old war horses that I was working with said, yeah, we've been there, done that, doesn't work. But all this money was being pumped into this thing. And, so we were on we're resurrecting this zombie basically. And guess what we found? Well, it doesn't really work that well. In fact, the whole model of that we think is addictions probably needs a serious revamp. Now, my interest out of that whole thing shifted towards trauma and towards how to treat trauma. I was doing a lot of work with Vietnam veterans, and out of that came my interest in men. And at one stage I thought, there was the first wave of the men's movement, and I remember going away on a retreat with a bunch of guys, and came home. My wife said to me, "So what did you do?" And I went, well, basically, we sort of got naked and played some drums and ran around the forest. And she says, well, how the fuck does that make you better in a relationship? And I went, yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? And one of the other
But I bet you had fun at the time.
Oh, it was brilliant. It was really good. The drum circle was fantastic. But as I said, the problem was, the moment I spoke to women about this, especially my partner, who's, very well educated and quite feisty, is that, yeah, but what's the bigger picture here? And I went, you know what, there isn't the bigger picture. And so I started thinking about that space more and more, and especially from my own, as a therapist, I've been in my own therapy for quite a while. And like you, Mark, my headmaster, my principal thought that the thing that I'd probably be best at is revolutions, and with that, possibly jail as an option, which I found offensive at the time, but couldn't articulate exactly why. And I had to learn to get some confidence in how I thought and what I was about as a human being. I was very much against, the Vietnam War, and I saw the climate issues already in the 70s and 80s as being something that's going to dominate our thinking for a long time. But more and more I came to recognise from my perspective, and including in family therapy, that the niche that we needed to pay attention to is actually men. So even in the early 80s and early 90s, I started to see this real critical issue emerge. Now, all three of us here, our lives have had to embrace some fairly significant change. And so, from a personal level, none of us really went there willingly, did we? A lot of times it was sort of like, you got to do this, otherwise it doesn't end well. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, I think it's the decisions we make during those tough times that really make us who we are. And whether or not we make a decision that's hard but better in the long run versus something that's easy.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what defines us in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been easy for me at the time to just, keep on keeping on.
The
back when I
abattoir.
was 25. Yeah, even the abattoir, I mean, that would have been much easier than going to Melbourne. So, yeah, I think it's those things. But at the time, you don't know that. I think that's the hard thing is how do you know when those moments have come? Because when you're actually deep in it, you don't really know.
Yeah.
And what makes someone take the hard decision versus not take the hard decision.
Yep.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that, Mark?
What?
I mean, you've even got a degree in change.
I have. What makes it's funny. We were talking off air, about that everything comes down. We've overcomplicated everything, haven't we? Pretty much any and how three pretty educated guys have probably struggled to be concise. Where we can talk for hours, but can we be concise? That's a new challenge. And I've done a lot of thinking recently about what does it actually take to be inverted commas successful. And I think the DNA of a lot of it, and it's interesting, Mark, you touched on technology. There's a lot of distractions and noise and shiny things that we get attracted to and drawn to, and again, I guess led away from the path. And this sounds really old-fashioned, but the thing that I'm coming back to now, and certainly the thing I think we need right today to help us move forward, is good old-fashioned self-discipline. And that sounds, self-discipline. And it sounds so. Even when I say that sounds simplistic. It sounds a bit judgmental. It sounds almost Victorian, and it sounds dated. It does, and yet it is the. As interesting, I was working with one of my clients, and they're starting to pull together. And this is a young tech company with a lot of good people, a couple of hundred people. And they've started a club where they want to actually encourage the guys there to create more content, online content, build influence, build thought leadership, which is supposed to do a lot of work in. And about 30 of these guys have put their hands up to be part of this, volunteered to be part of it.
Yeah.
And I was facilitating this, and then and so we ran a session. And after the first session, I basically explained why you would do it, what the benefits are, and how to get started. And I said the homework was to write one article, which is about 500 words, and a short post for LinkedIn. In total, even for beginners, that's probably 2 hours work, maybe 2.5 hours work across 5 weeks. You had 5 weeks to do 2.5 hours work. Then recently we had the second session, and of the 30 people who had volunteered, not been volunteered, 30 people who had volunteered, about 10, 15 of them turned up, less than half turned up, and only about a third of them had done any of that work. And it was really, I guess, illustrative to me of a couple of. This is a relatively young cohort, so it wasn't simplistically, it wasn't a load of old farts who were really struggling with technology and were struggling to get over themselves to, express themselves online, as it were. I mean, that's part of it, but I don't think a big part of it because we're relatively young. But the second part of it was just that just do the fucking work. You got 5 weeks, and I'm sure, Mark, you must see this all the time with some of your students. Like, it's 2 hours of your life. Go to bed, get up early, do it at the weekend. It's very, very doable. Yeah. And obviously that's one specific, but I think that sort of self-discipline thing is actually the DNA of so much inverted commas progress, inverted commas success. And yet it sounds judgmental. It sounds like you're your dad. And so I don't know. Maybe that's a random sort of thought process. But it's the failure point for so much is that we want all this overnight success. We want to be happy. We want to be this. We want to be that. And it starts with not sexy shit, not with brand new apps and technology and a new iPad. It starts with just fucking showing up and doing a bit of work. Yeah. So I offer that as an observation. I'm not quite sure it fits into the debate.
I think it does. One of the things that I spend a lot of time with when I'm working with people in change, because therapy usually is about change, and when I coach, is about you need to do the groundwork, and how do you get in touch with that groundwork? Well, the first step is practice some self-awareness, reflect on stuff. It's not, a lot of guys come into therapy because their partner points them, in that direction, go. Or
wear this, go there.
Yeah, I will leave, do you want to make your own breakfast? And so a lot of guys come in and they go, what's this about? And the trick that I've found is actually getting getting them in touch with some need that they haven't been able to fulfill yet to get it going. I mean, for me, part of going back to university was I was brought to tears in a bank. Mm-hmm. And I went, am I going to do this, surely at higher levels, but this until I retire at 65, and then what? And suddenly I was in touch with this pain, and I went, I don't want to do this. So from a neuroscience point of view, is there stuff in the research, in the literature that gives us some insight into that stepping into change? I mean, we've got interesting, facets now in neuroscience where we talk about neuroplasticity and we talk about epigenetics and we talk about a whole bunch of stuff that suggests that when people go, well, that's just me, I can't change, that's actually a furphy. That's a, cop-out essentially. If we want, we can.
Our brains, and we are really all driven to change, to something different. I mean, this is why the world's been conquered by humans, right? Is because we've always been driven by something different, and our brains are really hardwired for that, for finding something which is out of the ordinary or something that is, which is why we get bored. I mean, we've got this whole setup in our brain which makes us get bored when we're seeing the same thing over and over again, and then look for something else. And you see it in babies, and you see it in babies are much more interested in something new rather than something old, and we're all driven to that. And so we should be looking for change, and we should be actually driving it. Why we're not now as opposed to the past? Because in the past we always have, right? It's been this big thing, people, getting on ships and going out into the middle of doing crazy things. And we're not doing it anymore. And I was talking actually to a psychologist recently about this idea from Melbourne University, Brock Bastian, who does a lot of work on the flip side of happiness and the idea that you can't actually be happy unless you go through something difficult, a difficult change or something really, really strenuous or whatever. And so the big problem at the moment is that there's been this big emphasis on positive psychology. Now, positive psychology in itself is a great thing, but the media got hold of it and turned it into something which has been very detrimental, and that is that everyone should be rewarded, that everyone should get a and kids are taught, they get, and when you're on devices and all the rest of it, you're always getting rewarded, and so therefore you never go through that difficult period that you need to go through to actually have a positive thing at the end. Running a marathon is such a rewarding experience at the end because of the whole process you've got to go through. Climbing a mountain is a rewarding thing because of the process of actually climbing it. It's not. But if you were flown on a helicopter to the top, it wouldn't be anywhere near as rewarding as the bugger who's actually climbed that mountain. Right? Yeah. And so we need to get back to that people actually understanding that it's the journey and it's the process. And with business or whatever you do, it's a hard slog, right? Really hard slog. And you've got to realise that it is that. I read something recently, I think, Mark, you might have said it to me, but that it's not setting agendas, it's being consistent is actually what gets you there. You've got to actually just keep going. And you've got to be willing to do that over and over again. Because, building up a business or being happy in your life, marriages now break down there. 2 years, 3 years? You know what I mean? As soon as you get into that monotonous thing, it's too hard and you do something else. And, I think we really need to think about this. What are we teaching kids and what are we teaching what adults by being rewarded all the time? We need to have that process.
Your mountain story resonates, Mark. We all know a good friend of mine and yours, Simon Jordan, and who's a lovely guy, a marketeer based in the UK. He's an adventurer and a sort of philanthropist and a great business coach as well. But I think it was two years ago, I flew over to England when you could fly, when flying was just something you did, as opposed to some aspirational future thing that we might do. And I visited with Simon. He was living up on the top left-hand corner of Wales. Anyway, and we climbed Mount Snowdon, which is not much of a mountain in the bigger scheme of things, but it's the tallest mountain, I think, in the British Isles. And it was really one of those really good summer days, but it was rainy and chitty, and so it takes about 3.5 hours. You're climbing up all this shale, and you're getting to the top, and it felt like a real achievement. It was a good day out. And then but at the top there's this cafeteria, which was nice. So when it was cold, we went and then we had a cup of tea. But there's also a railway that goes all the way to the top of snow. So we came up the back of it, and we climbed up, and we were covered in Gore-Tex and shine and sweat, and like, we've just arrived. And then inside the cafe, there's like a whole load of, fat people, fat, lazy people, who'd just come up on the train with their flip-flops and their carrier bags. And it's like, guys, you've missed the point. It's not the view, like you said. Yeah. It's the journey to get to the view. Yeah. And there wasn't any view anyway because it was cloudy. Yeah. But it was such a good example. It's the journey. It's
the experience.
It's cliches. It's the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree. I gave a talk recently, it's now a couple of years ago. As you get older, time goes quicker. I don't know what the fuck that is about, but it's definitely the case.
Countdown.
Stop it.
Yeah, you're looking at the other end now.
So I'm giving this talk on, parenting and stuff at school, and I sort of thought, I'm going to open this with an interesting question. And I said to the audience, now the question is this: what's your job as a parent? And they sort of sat there for a moment, and then one person put their hand up, almost like, in school, going, it's to make my children happy. And I went, just a show of hands, who agrees with that? And it was over 2/3 of the group, and we're talking about, probably 150 people in the audience. And I went, look, I have to break it to you, but that's not your job. Your job is to assist your child to get to 18, psychologically relatively sound, physically as intact as possible, and an ethical, moral human being that can live within the social group. That's your job. Now, on the way, you will encounter these words: I hate you. My comment to that was, wear it as a badge of honour, because right, every kid's opportunistic. They'll go for the path of least resistance, and it's about immediate gratification, and they don't tolerate frustration very well, which is the job of socialisation. Part of my job is to get my child to be able to tolerate frustration, which leads on to that issue about self-discipline. It's not being judgy. It's actually, in my view, a very important element in helping a child, hopefully, firstly, my child, but then other children, if we've got contact with them, to develop it. So I see that as part of the teaching realm as well.
It's funny, my son, just to go back to that idea, my son now says when he gets frustrated, stop being such a bloody good parent, Dad.
Very cluey.
Yes.
Yeah, I used to get the don't psychologise me from both my kids. So then my daughter decides to become a high school teacher and work with kids from the Indigenous, country groups with mental health challenges.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, I've just got to take my hat off to her because she's an awesome human being.
Yes.
So it brings up a number of other issues, and that is that can we trust a lot of the messages that we're currently getting in our society about what makes us as human beings, both in our personal space with our families, but also in the broader community? Can we trust those messages? Or how do we become more discriminating? Because I know I was an early adapter. I mean, I played Pong, which is basically sending one white pixel across the screen to the other side and then back again. Like ping pong, but a lot, you know it.
Oh, yeah.
Mark knows it.
Yep,
We've probably all played it.
I remember being a kid, very fond memories of being a kid at the pub, and Dad would just give me handfuls of 20% coins, so I'd go and play Pong, and it was on a table. Yeah, and we used to just sit there and play it for hours and hours and hours and hours until we ran out of money, and then we go back and then we get another handful of 20% coins to, so get lost.
As this, developed, I'm an early adopter and adapter, and I went, oh wow, this is fun. So not only was it now games, but it became bulletin boards with discussion groups, and that was a real suck in. And then, the digital world changed dramatically with the introduction of the iPhone, and suddenly had all this information on hand. But the question is, how do we discriminate that which is actually well-founded and the stuff that's basically comes into the category of it's bullshit? I mean, at the moment, politically, I'm seeing, people sprouting conspiracy theories about stuff where you scratch your head and you go, this is insane.
I mean, COVID's been great for that. And some of the theories that are out there at the moment around COVID-19 are just, left field. It's I think it's really, really difficult. I think one of the big problems we've got is apps and the internet. The World Wide Web is free. And so therefore to make money from it, your whatever it is that you're trying to sell has to be really, really popular. And so they use a lot of algorithms to make sure you stay on them. Yeah. Whether that's apps or whether that's, Google or any of the other, and so we have to realize that because it's free, it means that there is a real problem with the fact that, the only way for them to make money is to keep you on there. And they do use really, really sophisticated algorithms to make sure that you stay where you are and you continue doing whatever it is you're doing, which is, as you know, that's addiction, right? Is what they're trying to do is use intermittent reinforcement to make sure we're addicted, because if we're not addicted, we're going to go to something else, and therefore they're not going to make money from having you on there and selling the advertisement associated with that. So it's about having control of that, taking back control of that. I think iPhone is a great technology if you use it to your own advantage, but you've got to realise that everything that's set up on there by default is to keep you on it. And so you've got to get rid of all those defaults. And you've got to set it up for you, not for them.
So, Mark, in the sort of business corporate world, what do you see as an impact from that whole approach? Do you see an impact? Do you see that this is taking perhaps, companies and individuals within those companies off on the wrong track?
Oh, man. We've covered a lot there.
I know. This is where I'm going. No. We need to get together again and again and again.
I'll start with because I think probably the biggest meta over all of this is I think you asked the question, can we trust messages? Can we trust them? Who do we trust? And one of the things I use in my keynote speaking, I talk about a thing that you probably heard of called the Edelman Index, which is a piece of research. It's basically about trust, and it's run all over the world, and you can slice it down into subgroups like countries. But fundamentally what it says is trust in organizations, in institutions, in the press, in the media, in almost everything that we're all of a similar kind of age, probably 10 years or something across all of us. But we grew up in an age where you trusted the bank manager, you trusted your public broadcaster, you trusted basically that organisations were more or less going to do the right thing. You fast forward now to 2020, and I think those levels of trust, they haven't not declined a little bit. They literally, if you graphed, they fell off a cliff, fallen off a cliff in the last 10 years, amplified probably by social media and a whole lot of other stuff. And it's interesting, you move that into the whole, we would look a little micro sort of last 3 or 4 months of the COVID thing talking, just keeping it Australia specific for a while. For the first few months, probably Australia did a good job of managing the thing, and then the governments, basically the federal government and the state governments, stopped bickering for about 10 minutes, which was very pleasing for a while. And it seemed to be everyone was rowing intelligently in the right way. And I think there's quite a lot of research that said trust was actually increasing in politicians and institutions, in those institutions. And then here we are now. It's all unbundling. It's all falling apart. Everyone's without being political, different states are doing different things, so that we're all aligned is no longer the case. And it's just a mess. And you can imagine the trust again is not only has trust gone down again, but people are throwing their hands up and they go, geez, guys, come on. You told us to do this and then this happened. And we knew we couldn't trust you, and we did, and we shouldn't have done. And so I think there's at a societal level, that whole trust or absence of trust in institutions. We've had the Banking Royal Commission here as well. Who do we trust and who makes up the rules? I think is a really, really interesting, and deep. There's a deep overarching thing that colours everything. Yeah. And then as that pertains to organisations, I guess it kind of depends. I mean, I think there are lots of great organisations out there that are run by, tend to, sweeping generalisation, I think they tend to be smaller. I think they tend to be newer generation organisations. They're better led by, I'm thinking of some that are probably good founders, good CEOs with a good, where profit is one motive, is not the only motive. Probably a broader appreciation of diversity and empowering others. So I think there's lots of good stuff happening. But gee, when you look at some of the, some of the large organisations, I shake my head. They're such dinosaurs, and they seem to be so disconnected. I mean, the banks are an obvious one. The Banking Royal Commission, some of the behaviours there, and the sort of little slap on the wrist that have gone on from that, and also, even from the Enron thing going back to the States 10 years ago. I think I'm right in saying no one's gone to prison, or one person's gone to prison. Yeah, and then we're doing this next. It's like, gee, what? Nothing seems to happen when we get extraordinary systematic breaches of trust at scale, and nothing gets done. So I'm sorry, I'm throwing up more questions than answers. That's good. I mean, I don't know, and certainly I think so. But what does that do? I think it removes that solid foundation from which we can feel secure and build. And for a lot of people, I mean, and where a lot of people are now, it's certainly in a business, probably in a social perspective as well, but certainly I think in a business perspective, in terms of they're trying to lead through ambiguity. We kind of don't know where we are. We don't know where we're trying to get to. And we're that thing of moving towards hope, but being stuck in fear. I think the fear is very amplified at the moment for understandable reasons. So a lot of people are kind of, I think, an organisation with jobs being lost. I think there's the fear factor is high and heightening as we see more job losses come. So I think we're actually in quite a tough place with a lot of this right now, and I think it's going to get worse. I'll just finish on this. And I do shake my head when we're now seeing politicians go, "Oh, the job is the unemployment rate's going up." It's like, what the fuck did you think was going to happen? Yes. How can you close the economy down for 3 months, 4 months? It just shows the complete disconnect of these people in making these, or some of the people making these, who clearly don't understand how non-public sector or non-funded parts of the economy, businesses that each of us here run, actually work. And if you don't understand that, that's a big problem of itself.
Thanks for that, Mark. As you said, this raises more questions than answers. So I'm going to come back to your area of expertise, which in some ways resonates with me as well.
Before we do that, because Mark was just talking about trust, which I think is really interesting, especially in the media. But don't you think it's a little weird at the moment where you've got an organisation called Twitter, which is actually the only way of knowing whether the President of the United States is telling the right thing or not? I mean, they're now labelling a lot of his tweets as being incorrect or possibly fake and so on and so forth. And it's a really strange world where you've got an organisation called Twitter, which doesn't sound and is the way of actually knowing whether or not the President of the United States is telling the truth or not. And that's a really strange world to be living in right now. Where the President of the United States is literally
and just a quick interjection on that. I was reading about 6 months ago the next level of sort of the fakery piece is where they're very, very close to basically being able to quickly, in the same way you get sort of text recognition software, you're now getting really close to really high quality virtual video copies. Because right now we can pretty say, gotcha, you on video said, demonstrated that. And it already exists, and it's about to become much more mainstream and available to more people, that you can basically concoct anything you want from a few pictures of someone doing something in video. And imagine what that's going to be like when you can no longer say, no, it was a fake video.
Yeah.
And for right and wrong, when it will be a fake and when it won't be a fake. And it's like, gee. And so to the point of trust and truth, I mean, I think the ramifications for that are going to be extraordinary and largely not good. Largely not good.
I agree. I mean, one of the things that, we know from developmental research and also in terms of, counselling and psychotherapy, when children get anxious, they usually have some issue with attachment. And so that issue of attachment has an impact on brain development. And so we're in an environment at the moment where, kids are not quite sure what the hell's going on. The adults for sure as hell aren't really sure about what's going on. Are we going to see a collective increase, progressively more and more and more of this collective anxiety moving towards some sort of almost paranoia? And how is there a way in which we can actually really work on offsetting that? Now, one of the thoughts that I've got about it is that, if the Jesuits were right, and I think they were, they said, give me the boy before the age of 7 and I'll give you the man. Now, I'm not going to be sexist. I'm going to include the girls in that as well. So it's in that 0 to 7 age group, if we can raise children to have a significant level of trust and engagement in their parents, where parents are consistent in their messaging and help that child to emotionally develop, that child is going to be better at discriminating later on about how to work in this, essentially chaotic space, because that's what I'm seeing is coming out of this. And I look at some of the boys that I work with, and I work with teenagers a lot, and the ones that have had that more solid attachment to their parents are actually better. They've got a better bullshit detector. And they're also clearer about what their needs are. And it's not about material things. It's not about having the best selfie on the block. They think more deeply. They're more self-reflective. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, I think they're called the formative years for a reason, and I think they really are, those first 7 years. I think it's not just the parents, though. I think we need to start educating educating, growing kids up with the village rather than as just parents. I think that's one of the biggest problems. I think something that we've really tried with our kids is that we've always had other adults around to give them other views and other people to talk to, and always having different age groups that they can play with and to have that. But those years I think are really, really important. I think they can be stuffed up later on. And I think they can be improved later on. I don't think that's sort of being hardwired and then that's it. But I think it can always be. But of course, those are really the most formative part of that period. But without trust, it's really hard for, I think, anyone to function. And I think that's a real big problem. But also we know so we're really talking about critical thinking, right? Being able to think critically about what you're actually reading. But we know that you can't actually think critically about something unless you know both sides of the argument, right? And I think that's one of the big problems now is that we're only getting one side of the argument often. And so we need to have more open conversations like this where we actually talk through ideas rather than just these snapshots where you just get one view and then you go, I'm on with them, or no, that's crap, Yeah.
And I think one of the things I'm observing that both maddens and in a word depresses me is this everything is almost like a cartoon binary vision of the world. It's either left or right, or right or wrong, or this or that, and it's like the world is. We all know the world. Everyone knows the world is. If they actually stop and are honest with themselves, the world is nuanced. It's complex. It's messy. It's incredibly rarely, crisply yes or no or digital in that sense. Yet so much now is being portrayed and seen through the lens of right, wrong, you're for me or against me, I agree or disagree. You're from this angle or that angle, and that's so destructive. Destructive. And I think we are dealing with massively complex issues. I'm interested in that word. I think, Gunter, you talk about chaotic. It was chaotic. So it's chaotic. It's been chaotic for a while, but I think within an overall context of generally things are getting better. Right now, with the COVID thing, it's chaotic, and rightly or wrongly, I think there's a sense that things are getting worse. And I know certainly I'm talking to some of my daughter is 22, and her peers, they don't have that. They're quite fearful and a little bit worried about the future. Whereas I think we all came out of university and stuff full of beans and possibility, and we had a path more, or a possibility of a path. I mean, Mark, you shared that you probably got on yours a little bit later, but it was there for you. It wasn't not there. Whereas I think now the kids are kind of saying, I'm not quite sure what the future looks like. So that concerns me.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly in my career, working really on the front line in mood disorders, in trauma, and just in general with conduct problems, we're not winning here. to pinch someone's phrase, and it is. I don't see chaos as a bad thing. I actually see it as a stimulating thing. It actually does, in a way, it almost stops me from getting bored. Because a client once said to me quite recently, you must have heard pretty well everything that you can sort of hear. And I sort of sat back and I went, you know what? I love what I do, but I can still be surprised. And I think that's why I love what I do, because of that. There is always something there that stimulates me and goes, wow, I haven't heard this before. Secondly, what are we going to do with that? And how does this fit in? Gentlemen, one of the things that I'm aware of is time. And, I've got this lovely little run sheet in front of me, which, I always do this and always veer off. And my wife said, why are you doing this? And I went, well, because it's a nice little structure and order and so on. She says, you don't work like that. You're organic. Forget this. Don't do it.
I think we've been chaotic, Gunter, in a good way, hopefully.
Yeah, I think so. So, one of the things that's on my run sheet is stuff about leadership, about, what is it in the current environment about men? Because, to be honest, I see, this thing about I get a lot of guys who are really keen to embrace change and equality, and, they want to do something about the gender issues and with that racism and so on. But a lot of them are really lost, and they grab on to stuff like in the United States, incels. And then, here it was this sort of weird thing about how to date women and how to score. They had a phrase for it. I can never remember it. I've got this subconscious block to that stuff. And how that also fits in with wellness, mental illness, and masculinity. And then, what do we do here and now as seasoned human beings, well embedded in our careers, to influence the future in a more constructive way? And I don't use the word positive, because I think sometimes we need to do some, stuff that a lot of people will go, well, that's really negative, but it's actually to stimulate growth. There ain't no pain, there ain't no gain if there's no pain. And with men, when I work with a lot of men in therapy, they're fearful of going into that deep space in their, the dark side of the soul, and embracing it, and then using that to, awaken the phoenix in a sense. And I think that's a really important aspect. So, any thoughts before we wrap up? Because I think this conversation space, I'm really pleased with how it's gone, and I would like to extend an invitation to both of you for us to pick up with this, and pick up on bits of the run sheet. And let's have another one of these.
You mean get to question 2 of 10?
Yeah, all right.
No, love it. I'll just quickly come back to I will try and be brief. I look back to answer that question. I look back to that thing I said earlier about that self-discipline and I talk a lot about now this idea of expect more. I think organisations should expect more of their people. Because we let people off the hook too easily.
But let me come in with that. I think as an organisation, we should expect more of our leadership in those.
I think it's exactly what I said. But we should also expect more of ourselves. It should be more. It should be more interdependence and less. And people need to be more self-reliant. I mean, if I've just done this whole new program about self-leadership, I think actually we're in the age of self-leadership.
Yeah.
For a whole load of reasons, we need to lead ourselves.
Yeah.
Through a very fast-changing and unknowable and evolving future, whether that's work or life or it's a mix of those things. But I think, again, and I know it comes back to that maybe finger waggy thing. We need to learn to expect more of ourselves, and then, but to go through more, to be more inconvenienced, to climb that mountain,
to sweat.
And I think, and I guess, and I'm always aware. I'm perhaps it's because of my age. I'm always aware. I probably painted as the simplistic guy. Just work harder, just do the work, just do the push-ups. But if everyone was banging on about how good the last game was with Jordan, Michael Jordan, excellent documentary. But the guts of that, I mean, he's clearly a talented guy, and obviously it's painted him as certainly a certain positive. I get that. But one of the things I think was undeniable was, one, it wasn't really about basketball. It was actually about leadership. Clearly talented, and clearly a very talented man. But what he certainly did, he asked more of other people. And I think he helped them to expect more of themselves. So it wasn't about him and that team just being. It wasn't about him just being fantastic. It was about that sort of rising tide lifting all ships. Yeah. And I think that challenge, that positive, and he was like, and one of those things was people needed to get to the gym and work harder. They needed to be fitter. Now, fitter's not about talent. No. Doing press ups, that self discipline stuff, the boring shit. There's nothing, there's no genius in doing press ups and sit ups. But I think that us positively challenging back to the those who are following us, guys, you've just got to believe in yourself and invest in yourself and do some of those self-discipline pieces, whether it's sitting down to write a freaking blog or going for a run or getting off your ass or not eating shit food. And as I say, I know it all sounds very lectury, but I think that's the foundation. It's not everything, but that's the basis on which you can build for the future into an unknowable future. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know how to navigate that. But I do know if you don't have that foundation, it's fucking hard. It's really hard. If you haven't got that self-awareness and don't do that self-work, then all the other stages almost can't happen because you don't have, you're not standing on a firm base. You're
no foundation.
You're trying to build a house on sand, being biblical, and it can't work.
Thanks for that. Mark?
Yeah, I love the idea of working on yourself. I think it's something my wife actually said to me several times, which has really resonated with me when I talk about, trying to change things to make it, work environment and so on more inclusive. And she's always saying, remember, you don't need to fix women. You need to fix yourselves.
Yes, great insight.
And I think that's really important. And it goes for, the problems we've got in Australia with Aboriginals. We don't need to fix it, what's going. We need to fix ourselves so that we treat them better.
Yes.
Same with women. Men need to actually fix ourselves. Yeah. We need to work on ourselves so that we treat them better, so that they can then flourish in this world. And I think we need to, keep thinking about this idea of, we just stop trying to fix women, stop trying to change things for them, and start trying to change things for us so that the world's better, so that everyone can flourish. And working on ourselves is really important, and expecting more of ourselves and everybody else. I think expecting more of our leaders and expecting more of ourselves is really tantamount to a lot of this. It's disgusting, I think, what some of the stuff you see and some of the things that leaders do, in businesses and, in politics and in education. I think, we should expect a lot more than we do.
Yeah.
They're also they're generally, as a sweeping generalisation, just also bloody disappointing, aren't they? Our leaders. Show me a freaking leader. Show me a leader. Give us someone to follow. Really follow. Yeah. And you struggle. I struggle.
No, I completely agree. It's one of the reasons why I talk about I'm apolitical. I come from a very humanistic existential perspective. To me, I judge whether this is good for the individuals as well as the community. Philip Zimbardo talks about we've become extraordinarily I-centric, and we actually need to shift into being sociocentric because, there is an I in society and we need to have that. It's not an either or. I always talk about, the moment we start thinking in either ors, we're on the wrong side of the page. We need to think and also. And it's a really good test. There are some things that are either or, okay? But a lot of times ideas, concepts, processes are inclusive, and I talk a lot about that in the masculine space, is that one of the things that we as men are usually educated in is to be territorial, which means that I'm going to protect my space no matter what, and makes us inflexible. Whereas if we're inclusive and we're open to a meaningful conversation and hearing each other, we can have different opinions, but we can arrive at a point where we go, you know what? If we put this and this together, it's going to be better for us. And I think that us is now at a crucial point where we're either going to make it or break it.
And I think also as men, we've always been taught to fix things.
Yes.
We're always looking for the way to fix something.
Yeah.
And if I'm talking to you and I'm looking to fix you, then your opinion can't be right because mine is, and I'm going to fix you, right? And so there's always this real problem with men actually just sitting there and listening to someone else as opposed to working out how am I going to fix because your opinion's wrong.
Yeah.
Your ideas are wrong or what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to speak personally. I've enjoyed the last hour. It's been too short, but I'm really hoping that you guys will join me for another episode about this.
You bet you'd love to.
Yeah, love to. Definitely.
All right.
Definitely.
Great.
A lot of things to talk about.
Looking forward to it. To everybody out there, I hope you found this stimulating, thought-provoking, and certainly a space for self-reflection. So until next time, here's us signing off from Inspiring Change.
Thank you, Gunter. And thank you for listening to Inspire Change with Gunter. Again, if you have any questions or comments or ideas for a show, you can email development@noirtainment.com. That's development@noirtainment.com. Thank you, and thank you for listening.